Welcome back to State of the Nation, everybody, with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, remarkably, Finnish police have done what I think our government should do. They've published detailed data, detailed information on the nationality of people who have been committing a shocking wave of sex crimes in the country. The results really speak for themselves. Compared to native Finns, the rates of sexual offences committed are as follows: 6 times higher for Somalis, 10 times higher for people from Iraq, 12 times higher for people from Afghanistan, 15 times higher for people from Syria. These are not isolated cases. They are hard statistics taken from the 2023 crime data. And in response, the Finnish government is rolling out the toughest immigration restrictions in its history. So this is really producing something quite significant. Now, with numbers like these, it's not hard to see why our government should start doing the same, but it is hiding data from you, British taxpayers. It's hiding information from you and simultaneously blaming you for suffering from misinformation. It's a very strange situation we're in. Now, worryingly, what little data we do have from freedom of information requests, I just mentioned it in our panel discussion, does suggest that foreign nationals are about 3 times more likely than British nationals to commit rape and other types of sexual assaults. But don't hold your breath, Britain, because I think what we need is to really know what is going on in our country. We need this data, we need this information. Now, joining me to discuss this study from Finland and what we can do here in Britain is former Immigration Minister Kevin Foster. Kevin, lots of people watching this show will be wondering, having done similar pieces to this in recent weeks, we've had data from Finland, we've had data from Germany, we've had information from Denmark, France. Why are British people in the dark when it comes to similar data and information about sexual offences and assaults?
Well, certainly, Matt, the figures from Finland are quite stark and quite interesting. And also, they actually stop people being all lumped in the same boat. Because when we looked at those figures you've just shown, Ukrainians, which have been a very big refugee stream into Europe and into the UK over the last 3 years, have a very similar rate of offending to the domestic population. Yet it's then you see it really stands out Syrians and Afghans. And that perhaps also gives us that information and also points to the type of cohorts we're talking about. Ukrainians were mostly women, children, family groups, perhaps grandfathers coming with grandchildren, because most men aged between 18 and 40 stayed to fight in Ukraine. Whereas if we look at those who come in small boats, who hide in the back of a lorry, predominantly from countries like Syria or Afghanistan in terms of their home nationality, they're overwhelmingly young men, single, aged between 18 and 40. So some of those factors perhaps start to be shown out by this. But I agree with you, Matt. Knowledge is power. We should be able to have an informed debate on this. We should be able to look at the details and information. And we publish all sorts of other details about those who commit criminal offences, their job background, what they got at school, whether they're able to read and write proficiently. Men in terms of violence against women, perhaps particularly if someone can actually define what woman is, which some on the left seem to now struggle with. But we certainly publish a lot of information. It's some actually we do publish this. As you say, it tackles misinformation. It stops every foreign national being lumped into the same category, and it gives us information that then we can work with and see what policy change we need to make.
Kevin, I know some of your colleagues in the Conservative Party, Robert Jenrick, for example, have called for this annual report to be published, for Parliament to be essentially, forced under, law to publish a report on nationality, immigration status of criminals, to publish data and information on welfare state, who takes what from the welfare state, who contributes what to the economy, taxation. Is this something that the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, are going to make more of as we go towards the next election? I mean, just having basic transparency, telling British taxpayers what on earth is going on in their own country?
Well, Matt, I can't speak for Kemi, but I can certainly say I supported Rob's campaign. I mean, please see the approach he's taking on this. Yes, we should be giving their information, giving people a chance to debate the real facts and statistics, but also actually inform people of some of the challenges we've got with migration policy. And when we see the list of citizenships we've seen there from Finland, you instantly look at Syria and Afghanistan. those are countries that we need to have a debate about doing returns to, because there is a new regime in Afghanistan we would struggle to deal with, and goodness only knows what regimes and government is going to emerge in Syria.
Sure.
Those are different. So what do we do with those we want to remove from those countries? If we can't send them back there, do we look at third countries? As, for example, Trump's looking at, for example, with El Salvador and the partnership he has there.
So we just had a discussion prior to this segment about, is it actually time for Britain to bite the bullet and accept that we're going to have to leave the European Convention on Human Rights in order to better control our borders and remove foreign national offenders? Obviously, this week and last, the Telegraph and other newspapers have been full of these shocking stories about people who, to be frank, have been gaming the system and shouldn't really be in Britain. Now, this is obviously a clear line between the Conservative Party, which has yet to commit to leaving the ECHR, and the Reform Party, which is unequivocal in saying it wants to leave the ECHR. Do you think the Conservative Party is going to start moving on that issue?
I think, Matt, the Conservative Party probably will move on this issue, and partly because of some of the absolute ridiculous judicial activism we're seeing. And we've had the chicken nuggets case. We've had the case where someone joined a terror group, even though it's pretty obvious it didn't reflect their views, to try and avoid removal from the UK. And ultimately, the debate we have to have is the principle that borders are sovereign. Is our nation state sovereign and able ultimately to decide who should be within our borders, particularly if they pose a threat to our wider population? And that is where I think this really boils down to. But I think, Matt, even if we do leave the ECHR, we also have to remember there are other parts of international law and domestic law that sometimes is being stretched to ridiculous levels by somewhat activist judges. And that, I think, also needs to be defined about. It should be Parliament, not the judiciary, that makes policy, and it's the judiciary's job to enforce the law and interpret law, but not to create it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kevin. I'm sure that would be very reassuring to many of our viewers. And just while we have you, I mean, obviously the polls, a lot going on at the moment. Again, we've had some strong numbers for reform. We've got polling that shows immigration for many voters is the top concern in the country. The one issue they really want to see action on, over 75% of people are saying, look, just bring the numbers down. Do you think the Conservative Party, and I'm putting you in a bit of a spot here, but do you think the Conservative Party gets the mistakes that it's made on immigration? Do you think that it really understands that the liberalisation of the immigration system under Boris Johnson, under Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, that was an enormous mistake?
I think many in the party get that, we need to demand, particularly on the small boats crisis as well, because even if we get numbers down on legal migration routes, if we've still got a position where someone can literally just pay a smuggler and get here, then you can take down legal migration. But if someone thinks, actually, I can just hop on a boat and get there anyway, that's not going to work. We are going to need to also tackle both of them. I think people get it was serious. And yes, reform is doing well. We can say they had a pretty spectacular result in the Welsh Valleys last night. So we should remember they're not just taking vote from Conservative Party. They are now starting to take a lot of vote out of Labour and some quite traditional heartlands. No one's going to claim a Welsh Valleys seat as a place where there were lots of secret Conservatives just waiting for a chance to vote for someone else. But I mean,
that's why I asked the question. It looks like it's becoming pretty existential here for the Conservatives. There are areas of the country, it appears, that Nigel Farage can reach that Kemi Badenoch cannot reach.
Well, I think, Matt, I'd be a very optimistic Conservative if I said that the Welsh Valleys were going to be a place where we think would in future be a great place for the Conservative Party to win votes. I think it's safe to say for most of the last century, it's not been a place we've done particularly well. So, Reform will, I think, be interested in the fact that they can do so well in those areas. And for Labour, that is probably the biggest concern, that places that even when, with the Boris majority in 2019, with the Margaret Thatcher majorities back in the 80s, these were areas that were not voting Conservative. They were solidly voting Labour all the way through that time, and now they're moving away from Labour quite dramatically, actually, in that particular case. So I think what the Conservative Party needs to focus on is what is the policy sense, because we're not going to resolve this issue sat in a room with Nigel like some sort of colonial masters, saying, well, you have this seat and you have that seat. That's not how this is going to be done. We shouldn't treat voters like that either. But what we will need to do is have clear and robust policies on migration, have a clear answer on what we do around the small boats crisis. We can look across the Atlantic and see the way Trump's come into office, clear plans drawn up before coming into office, getting on and implementing them afterwards, and using every tool of government, including trade and visa sanctions, to deliver on the priority that people say, which was securing the southern border. Our version of that is the Channel, and that will be the challenge for both the Conservative Party and for Reform over the next 3-4 years, is how you can convince the public you have the answer that you can then implement.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kevin Foster, for joining us tonight. Some fascinating shifts beginning to take place in British politics. Read between the lines there.